Trey Hendrickson has a leverage problem. Let's break down why.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Liscow. He's James Rapien. We're your hosts of Locked On Bengals, covering the Cincinnati Bengals here since 2016. And you can find James writing as well over at BengalsTalk.com. Welcome back to the everydayers who know this is a place to find your everyday updates and analysis on the Cincinnati Bengals throughout the offseason, into the regular season, all year long. If you're not an everydayer yet, you can become one. It's pretty easy. You just listen to or watch Locked On Bengals every day. You can hit that subscribe button to make that easier on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. And shout out to everyone who makes Locked On Bengals their first listen as well. Today, we're going to dive back into the Trey Hendrickson topic. And many of you are probably asking, why are you guys doing that? Well, we got a report that indicates what the Bengals offered and can use that also as an opportunity to clarify the leverage issue here that Trey Hendrickson has, which I think is interesting, and we do have a firmer understanding of today than we did before. Plus, Duke Tobin's scouting staff got a little bit of an offseason shakeup. The Bengals lost a scout. They hired an analytics staffer, and we will get to that a little bit later in the show. But James, let's start with the clarification. It's sort of newsy. The indication that the Bengals made a specific monetary value offer to Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, Mike Florio reporting that the Bengals have, quote, offered roughly $28 million per year. And whatever the amount and structure, he wants more, is basically what Florio reported. And obviously, that's true. I think it's interesting because the $28 million, there's been a lot of fans that certainly on social media see that, and they say, oh, well, Trey's being stubborn. If they're really offering $28 million, why wouldn't it be done? And obviously the structure is a big part of that. The other part of it is that's still below market. And I think that's what's interesting is if they had offered him $28 million in average annual value in January, this is probably done. I don't think Trey has any beef, any problem, but the market shifted. And when the market shifts, it shifts. And I think that's what's tough. I think that's kind of been the holdup. I go back to some of our shows in January, shortly after the season, when we talk about the big three, when we talk about Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson, and I mean the big three of this offseason. Well, I think we were under the impression that deals were going to get done. And then the market shifted. And you saw Max Crosby get the deal that he got. You saw Myles Garrett patch things up with the Cleveland Browns. And then Danielle Hunter, who is the one guy age-wise that is closest to Trey Hendrickson. Myles Garrett is just a different beast, different animal. You can't really compare him, right? He's the Jamar of pass rushers. So it's just going to be a bit different. It's the market shifted, and Danielle Hunter kind of cemented that. And so, yeah, if you're Trey, $28 million is still below market value. And you're going to be probably in the same place next year feeling that way than you are that you are this year. And so I get that element of it. At the same time, the leverage portion, and this is why I think Trey showed up on Tuesday when he did and kind of surprised everyone with a 24-minute press or news conference on the field and tried to say, hey, pay attention to me from a contract standpoint. Let's get this done. I'm not being unreasonable. And I'm not sure Trey is being unreasonable, by the way, but the Bengals have all the leverage. They don't have to blink. They don't have to pay Trey. He isn't set to become a free agent. That's one of those things where when they have all of the cards and Trey doesn't like the card that they've offered him, well, how does he get a second card? And I think that's what he's trying to get them to do. And will they do it? When will they do it? Do they feel compelled to do it at all? All questions that will get answered in the coming weeks and months.
It's undoubtedly what he is trying to do. He's trying to find a path to exert some pressure. He's trying to find a scrap of leverage, and we'll dive into that a little bit more from what he has to do to get his contract to count in 2025 perspective and what he really can do in terms of making things uncomfortable, because all he can really do is make things uncomfortable. And he can get his teammates to speak up for him on his behalf. He can be a distraction, which is something that he said he doesn't really want to do, right? But he can, and if things are feeling personal for him now because he was reminded of fines and reminded of the financial reality that he faces, well, he can make it ugly. He can make it uglier than he has. And
Sure.
that is something that I don't think any of us want to deal with. It's exhausting watching this happen and talking about this as much as we've talked about it for the second straight offseason, not with Trey, but with contracts in general, just contracts that are lingering, that other teams aren't as stubborn about, where other teams will make it happen and be more proactive. And that's really the issue here, right? Because if you go back to earlier in the offseason when we're projecting contracts for these guys, 28 million is wildly reasonable before Max Crosby, Daniil Hunter, and Myles Garrett. And there are differences between Trey Hendrickson and those players. Max Crosby, the significant difference is age. Max Crosby's deal takes him through his age 32 year. And I do have to correct, when we talked about this deal last time, that 2027 salary likely guarantees early in 2026. I misread a fine detail on that contract. So Max Crosby did get effectively 26 and 27 guaranteed. Daniil Hunter, which is only his age 29 and age 30 seasons, by the way. As soon as he's 31, the Raiders can't get out of that contract with no dead money and no guarantees. Daniil Hunter got a 1-year extension. He got a lot of money, but it was a 1-year extension with $35 million in new money. And Myles Garrett is Myles Garrett. So there's differences between Trey and those players, right? He from the Bengals' point of view, easy to see arguments as to why, well, if you want something approaching 35 million or something above 30 million, we'll give that to you for 1 year. And Trey doesn't want 1 year. He wants multiple years, and he wants guarantees into the future, right? And then you can look at Max Crosby and say, well, we can't give you the Max Crosby money because you're older. As soon as Max Crosby is the age you are now, the Raiders can cut him with no cost, no risk. And you're not Myles Garrett. We love you, Trey. We think you're great. You're not Myles Garrett. Not controversial to say that, right? So is there a middle ground that they need to find? Absolutely. But the reason that this isn't done, and we're going to get into the leverage part because that's a big part of the reason, is one, the leverage disparity here and Trey not having any. Two, the indirect comparisons for Trey and these three players that have signed bigger deals. And three, that this massive jump in the market where, because Nick Bosa's contract existed as a previous outlier, we saw Garrett, Hunter, and Crosby all leapfrog Bosa's $34 million instead of getting to the Brian Burns, Josh Hines Allen numbers of 28 and change, which is where the Bengals are for Trey, which is right there in that second tier. And Trey wants first tier money because he's coming off a DPOY year, second in Defensive Player of the Year voting, and all the sacks he's had in the last 2 seasons. And so I understand where both sides are coming from here, but to find that middle ground, they probably need to settle in the low 30s in my head. That's something I think the Bengals might get to for multiple years. Might.
If you can get to the three, and then have some incentives baked in there that get him to 32, 33. Like there's a way to do it. Now, I will also say this. If the Bengals get Trey up to $28 million this year in salary from 16 in salary, and then they're tacking on years, like that's reasonable. I don't think people are there. I think people see, oh, well, 28 million. It's not. And I don't blame Trey for not wanting that and taking that. But can they find a middle ground? Will both sides feel compelled to find that middle ground? I think that's the question. I think Trey would love to find the middle ground. I think everything he's doing is being completely reasonable, and he's searching for answers. Part of that has to do with his agent signing that 1 year, agreeing to that 1 year contract that kind of put him in a bind. And it did now. And it was weird at the time, and it's weirder now. And I get it. $21 million in new money. and you get some extra cash flow, all of those things. It made sense in that moment. But if you had the foresight to be like, oh, well, he's going to be even better in 2023 and even better in 2024, well, there's no way you do that deal. So I think there's a topic there. And obviously we hinted at the leverage portion. We will get to all of that as Trey Hendrickson watch continues coming up next. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, reminders, all in one easy place, maybe even travel plans for all things 2025 NFL season. What would it mean to eliminate the I didn't know excuse from your family's routine? And could assigning everyone their own color finally solve the who does what confusion in your house? That's where Skylight Calendar comes in. And maybe it's as simple as having different color codes for home games and road games. If you're someone that's traveling for the Bengals this season, to watch the Bengals this season, to hopefully watch Trey Hendrickson this season. Well, right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylight.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL. Again, skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/NFL.
You mentioned the one-year extension that Trey Hendrickson agreed to in 2023. And just to put some context around that number, at the time, that $21 million 1 year of additional money was the third biggest extension or third biggest contract in terms of APY. It was only 1 year for Trey that was signed in 2023, besides Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa, the big outlier contract that year that really exploded the edge rusher market period, going to 15% of the cap as average per year value at the time of signing in 2023, where the next biggest deal that offseason, well, DOs, Rashawn Gary and Montez Sweat, both right around $24 million that year. And then Trey Hendrickson at 21. Now, just 2 years later, the number at the top of the market has doubled to 40 million. Not quite doubled in the case of the 24 million, but you get the idea here. Things went pretty ballistic. And a lot of that is because of this outlier deal for Nick Bosa, the $34 million that he got from San Francisco. And that shows you, as we've seen with the wide receiver market as well, how quickly markets can change in the NFL due to one outlier. When there's a number, agents see number, agents go bigger than number. And so if one player does it, we've talked about this with Patrick Mahomes a lot as well, the way that influenced the quarterback market. That leads to these market explosions when top of market players actually do need new deals. And we saw that, of course, most significantly with Myles Garrett this offseason. But the reason I bring all that up is just to point out that at the time, $21 million for Trey before any of the 17 sack seasons was pretty good money. It was only 1 year. That was a mistake. Trey and his agent, if they had that foresight, like you said, should not have agreed to that. But I just wanted to put context around that number that now sounds tiny, but at the time was a very reasonable number for Trey.
Yeah, and it came with $5 million in a signing bonus. So that's why he's making $16 million this year. That's why the cap hit is $18 million. Just to give more context, they didn't agree to a $16 million deal. So there's that. Two, they are negotiating with the Bengals and getting a year added on at that point after an 8-sack season. That's a win, I would say, to a degree. And so I do think that you can put some context around it and understand the logic and the mindset. But it was still a mistake. It was still a mistake because he lost all of his leverage now after playing the best ball of his career over the past 2 years. After being, I mean, you could say 2021. I mean, he was awesome that year. But I mean, these past 2 years, just the numbers, 35 sacks, that dwarfs all these other guys that we're mentioning that have signed extensions and huge money that Trey's looking for. And so that's where it gets tough because he's in his prime from a production standpoint, but age-wise, you're like, all right, well, is there a cliff or is it going to be gradual? And that's why I think the Bengals prioritized, and not because of Joe. I don't think the Bengals prioritized T or went that route because Joe preferred the pass catchers over. I think part of it, the big part of it, age, and then obviously the leverage. Trey's under contract. T wasn't. They had to tag T. There was going to be deadlines with T. Jamar is the no-brainer, must sign, one of like 5 guys on the planet that you sign the moment you can, basically. And so Trey is not that important. He's not Jamar. And so I think that's what's interesting now is when it comes to this, the Bengals have Trey under contract. The Bengals have Trey under contract on a heck of a deal, one of the best values in the NFL if you're getting 17 games of Trey Hendrickson for $16 million in base salary and an $18 million cap hit. So he sort of has to play by their rules to a degree when it comes to this negotiation. And he's not going to get $35 million per year. I tweeted that the night Max Crosby agreed to his deal with the rate. I was like, yeah, this may affect Trey. This is not going to set the bar for Trey. Maybe it does in his mind initially, but even I think he knows he's not getting $35 million in average annual value on any deal with the Bengals. So can they find that common ground? I think it's kind of up to the Bengals because they hold all the cards.
And then there's this whole franchise tag lingering out in the ether that the Bengals have used and aren't shy about using. They'll use it, I think, more than any other NFL team. The franchise tag for a defensive end in 2026 is $26.5 million is where that's projected right now.
So that's a deal.
And so, right, like if
that's
the Bengals
a deal.
If the Bengals
very T-like, it's very T-like. Yeah,
take this deal, or we're going to franchise you next year, and you're going to be stuck again. Trey would hate that, and the drama would be endless. But the Bengals could then have Trey Hendrickson for 2 years and $42 million, or if you add the $5 million signing bonus, 47. Right?
This is very T-like last year, where it's like. I remember, I could say it now. I don't care. I told T, I was like, they may tag you again. He's like, man, don't say that. I'm like, well, they're going to tag you again. Look at the numbers. Obviously, it worked out because he got paid. At that time, it did not feel like he was going to get paid. So there's a lot of context there as well. So, yeah, I think that's a really good $26 million. Oh, that's tough. That's tough, Jake. Because even if he's like, screw it, I'm going to miss half the year and then show up and get 8 sacks or 9 sacks, or then they could still tag him because he's a steal and tag and trade him. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this is where the leverage thing is so hard for him because one, if he doesn't show up this year, his contract doesn't count. It does just roll over into next year. The Bengals are stuck with that salary cap expense on the books for 2025, but then they get credited for it in 2026. So the Bengals don't care. The Bengals are like, well, we'll get that salary cap space next year. And if Trey wants to do it again, at least we'll have the extra space so we can go do with it what we need to do with it. And we'll deal with that next year. They also have mandatory fines for training camp. It's $50,000 per day of training camp that Trey Hendrickson misses. That adds up to $1 million pretty quick. Doesn't take too many days for that to happen. And Florio did the math on the game checks, $888,000 per game check for Trey Hendrickson if he chooses to hold out any games in the regular season. And beyond all of that, for Trey Hendrickson to have any hope of being a free agent in 2026, he will need to show up somewhere around the trade deadline so that with whatever ramp-up time he needs, he can be on the roster for 8 games. Because there will be, waivers for showing up late and everything. So he will need to show up at a certain time in order for enough of that contract to be active for it to count in 2025. So when we talk about the leverage problem for Trey, there's the franchise tag, and there's the fines, and there's the reality that if he doesn't show up this year, he might as well retire because he's going to be stuck in this situation next year. Right?
I don't think he's retiring, just so you know.
I'm just saying, like,
oh, no, I know.
It's not a good option.
No doubt. By the way, if I was him and I was going to sit out, I would just show up and play Madden during practice. I would just be in the building and just do that. Like bring a Game Boy out to practice.
I think what's difficult is
I just found my Game Boy Advance the other day, Trey. So if you want to borrow it for practice, I got you.
What's more difficult for Trey is that the Bengals aren't going to play nice with Trey the way they played with Jamar. And Jamar did the whole hold-in thing last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was to some degree the Bengals cooperating, being like, look, we understand the situation. We're
Yeah.
not gonna press too hard on this. But they were, I think, a little accommodating with Jamar, despite how unfortunate those negotiations went last year.
Mhm. And so I know I agree. It's completely different. And yet I keep coming back to, all right, well, what makes them the best? How do you find a way to get that middle ground? And we'll see what the next domino to fall, and hopefully the next time, hopefully we're not talking about this tomorrow, would be Tuesday when Joe's set to talk.
Mhm.
Joe Burrow was set to talk last week, had a couple media things. This had nothing to do with Trey. Just clearing this up real quick. Had nothing to do with Trey and Trey's comments or statement to Schefter, but they pushed it to this week. Joe's going to talk this week, barring something unforeseen. What will he say about Trey? He's going to get asked about Trey. I promise you, multiple questions. And so that's the next step here in the Trey Hendrickson saga. Because if there is any leverage for Trey, it would be if Joe did his Super Bowl media row thing, but he did it in front of us and said, hey, Trey's a huge part of our team. He needs to be here for multiple years and get what other guys are getting at his position because he led the NFL in sacks. Like, he can do that. Will he? I don't know. I think that's the next domino to potentially fall, though.
On another note, the Bengals did add a Trey to the payroll. Let's talk
Trey.
about the Bengals' new analytics staffer, the departure of a scout, to finish the show. Coming up next.
You almost got me there.
Yeah.
Pay Trey. I thought they paid Trey. I thought you had some breaking news for me. Tell them about the new Trey in town that is not Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, we would have just had to scrap 20 minutes of Locked On Bengals if that had happened. So it hasn't. But the Bengals lost a scout since we last talked. I don't know if we maybe mentioned this in passing in a recent episode, but Christian Sarkisian leaving to Northwestern University to do some general management.
He's the
stuff,
general
which-
manager,
which
the
is
athletics
a-
department.
which is a thing in college now, apparently. But going to my alma mater to do some football operation management, some
Are
general
you mad they
managing.
passed on you? Are they mad? Are you mad about that? I mean, that's your alma mater. Like,
That's a pretty tough football program to touch right now. That's a bold step for Christian going into a tricky situation at the moment.
hey, that's like his roots, man. He's like Northwestern through and through. So
I get
congrats
it.
to him.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt. I mean, it's a step up for him, right? He gets a general manager job. He gets to do it at a Big Ten university. It's just in the wake of the Fitzgerald stuff there and that firing in disgrace, it's rebuilding a program is what he's tasked with. But we'll see what the Bengals do to replace him. I would imagine there is a scout hire coming. I would imagine. Now, this is the Bengals front office that we're talking about that loves their small scouting staff. So we'll see. I don't think that we can just assume that they're backfilling this job, but because they're so small, I think that actually makes me expect that they would backfill this job. I do not think that's what Trey LeBounty's hiring indicates. Maybe it is. Maybe I end up wrong about this, and this is them filling out their scouting department with a different kind of staffer. But Trey LeBounty comes to the Bengals from the Buffalo Bills as a scouting research analyst. He worked in the Bills organization in an analytics world, and in his LinkedIn post of all things, where he indicated his move to the Cincinnati Bengals, Trey LeBounty thanks ownership, Duke Tobin, Sam Francis, the Bengals' only analytics guy that we know of, Samuel Francis, for believing in his ability to add value with the intersection of scouting, research, and analytics.
I think it's much needed. You can't have a one-person analytics department. I think from a scouting standpoint, well, you can. They proved it. You can. But from a scouting standpoint, it can be really valuable. One thing that everydayers have heard you say a lot is the sheet. The sheet is analytically driven. There's a lot of analytics that go into that. And it's not the only thing, but it is a big part of it. And so to have someone that played football, played tight end, D1, has experience there, has experience as an intern, for the Buffalo Bills, has experience in the college game, and then to come in to the Bengals organization and work with Sam Francis, it's a great thing. I hope this isn't all right, we're going to go the analytics route and not and add to that part of our scouting staff and not add a Christian Sarkisian replacement. All right. You still need that. You still need that area scout. But this is good news for Trey LaBounty and good news for the Bengals that they added Trey LaBounty, and he's got an awesome name. And yeah, it's not paying the Trey that we talked 20 minutes about today, and we're going to continue to talk about. But I do think Trey is a really nice addition to the Bengals front office.
It is cool to see the intersection of football and analytics as sharply as Trey LaBounty shows it off. Like you said, he was a tight end at Stanford. He's 6'7", huge dude. This is a guy that you see him, you're going to think he's an athlete. But he was also
he is, and at Miami. Don't forget Miami, Ohio. Now
he did a master's at Miami in sports analytics. He did a master's of management science and engineering with a focus in computational social science at Stanford from 2022 to 2024. So has a lot of education in that area. Was a data analyst at Stanford from 23 to 24, and also a training manager where he worked with the team, and then was an analytics intern with Buffalo from 24 to 25. And so now taking a step up from the Stanford to Buffalo to Cincinnati pipeline that doesn't really exist. It's not really a pipeline, but going from data analyst to Stanford where he played football to an intern at Buffalo and getting a full-time job with the Bengals. I like seeing them expand their analytics department. I like seeing them going young here and bringing in someone who has worked through multiple levels with getting some experience and has an educational background and played football. Good intersection of skills. Hopefully it adds to the room and he can find a way to present the analytic perspective that can help them improve some of their drafting practices. And we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think it can't be the replacement. I need it to be the addition.
He's not a scout.
And so as long as that's the case and they're not like, oh, actually, Mike Potts can just travel a little bit more. He can, he could just go a little. We get videos of the pro days already. Like,
yeah, we'll just get another article about how the Bengals are doing everything with video now, and it'll be like, okay, guys, come on.
Yeah. So as long as that's not it, like Mike Potts is already racking up enough Sky Miles, right? I'll speak for him. Like someone else can go handle some of that. And Christian mattered. That's the other element here. Is he mattered? He was a part of things and a big part of it. Zach Taylor has mentioned him multiple times, whether it was on camera, off camera, just in chatting about the scouting staff. So to lose him, I'm going to replace him. That being said, really excited about Trey LaBounty. And if this is adding to the staff for all the criticism the Bengals get, this is certainly a positive one that should be highlighted that way. And hopefully that's the case because there's a lot of reasons to like him. And you mentioned Stanford football, Miami Oxford football star. All right. Red Hawks. That's how I'm going to think of him.
Did he actually play there?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He accumulated games at Miami.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
All right. There you go.
How about that? I'm claiming that Stanford Schmanford. That's a little small school. I'm talking about Miami Oxford, baby. The big dogs in the MAC. Big dogs.
And we're sure they're still in the MAC. I was apparently very wrong about Marshall in an episode once. They changed conferences like 20 years ago. And that goes to show how much I pay attention to MAC.
I'm 99.9. Yeah.
Ohio I'm joking. I was pretty sure they were still in the MAC.
Yeah. I was 99.9, and then you made me second guess it.
I was self-effacing with not knowing about Marshall all those years ago. But I think it's nice to see them adding to the analytics department. That's what I'm encouraged by here.
We are 30 seconds away from beating the 30-minute mark for the first time in quite some time. You think we'll do it?
Yeah, we're done. That's it. I'm just saying.
I'm excited about the analytics. We did it. We under 30 minutes. We're supposed to have every show. You got to stop talking. We did it. Say bye.
Joe Burrow's coming up this week. We've got another day of open OTA or off-season program practices to talk about as well. We'll have you covered throughout the week here on Locked On Bengals. And until next time, thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.
We did it.